Oh, all right. Is this working?
So it does start now.
Now it is. I should probably turn it on. That actually helps. It's been a crazy weekend. It will continue to be as we get into VBS. So if you did sign up to bring something and you forgot or didn't bring it, you can bring it tomorrow evening, probably starting around 4 still. It's not too late to bring stuff if you signed up for it. But already there's, I think, over 120 kids pre-registered. And that's kind of crazy. So be praying for that. And I've been told that many of them are middle schoolers. So, yeah. So it's a good thing that the theme is Jesus at the beach because you're going to be packed like sardines. In there. So, all right? But don't be salty about it. It's going to be great. All right? I'll just wave and walk by them. Oh. All right. And I will also say, I looked in the room and it's decorated already, and there's like real sand in there.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. And I hope we have a really powerful vacuum at the end of the week. All right.
It'll be great.
Woo! But that's what you get to do as a middle school leader. You just like, sand, yeah! It's going to be great. I can't wait. You know? Yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So I'm really excited about tonight. I'm talking about why in a minute. Brayton mentioned our council meeting. We'll have other events to announce next week, but really, frankly, when you gear up for that big of a VBS, everything's been VBS in our house. And so we'll talk about other events for the fall after VBS is behind us, and it will get there. But many of you have been to what we call our council meetings because we just kind of give counsel as to what's happening at SNS. And we just talk about the direction of the community, what we've done and how it worked, what God's doing now and where God might be leading us. So you're welcome to come to that. But at our last meeting, because we talk even about what are we going to study together as a community. I don't determine that's just up to me. If something is on people's hearts and like, I'd really like to know about this, or maybe we could study this, I'm totally down with that. I'm open to influence and suggestions and all that. But it was suggested that we work through a gospel. And I was thinking about that, and I realized I didn't know the last time I'd done a formal study of one of the four gospels. Thinking through just what I've taught in this church over the years and the messages I've listened to and all of that. And I'm like, we talk a lot about Jesus, right? We read all about the letters that talk about Jesus. We just went through 1 Timothy here. So we talk about the letters that talk about Jesus. We sing songs about Jesus. So maybe it would be important and valid to actually read through a gospel, which is actually Jesus talking and interacting with people. And so I was like, that's really vital. And so that really kind of resounded with me to spend time doing that. So I know SNS is about 8 months old, and we're going to have a 1-year birthday party, by the way, in November. That's one of the things we'll talk about at our council meeting. But if you come to SNS, you know that kind of part of our vision, when we can, is to do a verse-by-verse study through a book of the Bible. And so far, I know we've done 1 Timothy and we've done Habakkuk. So in 8 months, we've done that. And we did a couple other series, but they weren't verse by verse. But because the Gospels are so long, if we did a verse by verse, some of you would be retiring. And I'm talking about people like Sean would be retiring by the time we got through the whole Gospel. So we're going to do a chapter a week of the Gospel of Mark. And so the challenge is going to be to either before or after read that chapter, and we're going to teach a part of that chapter, like one thing or a part of a story that's in that chapter during the week. So that's going to be the challenge to do that as we go through the book of Mark. Now, we're going to take a couple, I don't want to call them pit stops, but we're going to take a couple breaks because for one, as a whole church, Gateway Church is going to be going through 40 days in the Word for 40 days. It's a kind of a mess, not I don't call it a campaign, but it's like a message series, but it's a whole church study. So we're going to, we are Gateway Church, and so we're going to do 40 days in the Word. Everyone's going to get a free study book. And then I'm going to do messages that tie in to each work of study. And it's going to be a great book because it's going to really deepen our respect and love of the Bible. That's what I would love for us to pray for, that time does that. After that's over, we'll jump back into Mark until Christmas time. And what would Christmas be without a Christmas series? Right? You're almost obligated to do some sort of Christmas series or you feel like you're doing something wrong. So we'll do something right before Christmas, before we finish up the book of Mark together. So, most of us are aware, now we go into the overview, right? Are you ready for that? Most of us are aware that the Bible is divided into two parts, right? The Old and the New. So, beyond that, the New Testament has groups within itself, right? Groups of text, right? And how many Gospels are there, people? 4, right? Say them with me. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Jesse. Yes.
Jesse.
Oh, sorry. I got that wrong. Right? Did you know that? And then it goes from there, obviously, through some Acts and some letters to the epistles. Epistles means letters, and they're letters. And then we end with Revelation. Did you know that there are songs to help you memorize the books of the Bible? There's quite a scary variety on YouTube. And when I say quite scary, I mean quite and scary. All right. So, in fact, I want to give you an idea. My question is, can everybody go like this? All right. So we're going to get a little bit of an idea here on what you can find to help you memorize the books of the Bible. All right. All right.
Here we go in a 1, 2, 3. We got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the Gospels. Go make disciples. Go make disciples. Acts and Romans. First and 2 Corinthians. Galatians and Ephesians. Philippians and Colossians. First and 2 Thessalonians. Timothy 1 and 2. We got Titus, Philemon, and Hebrews, James. First and 2 Peter.
All right. I trimmed it there. I didn't want to give away the end. All right. But if you like how they did the New Testament, you should hear how they throw down with the Old. I mean, whoa! When they get to some, when they get to the back hook, it's off the hook. It's off the chain. I mean, it's lit. It's lit. It's on fleek. It's all of those things. All right. Anyway, that's about all I could take of it. I had to watch it once to preview it for you people, so I took the brunt of the pain. Thank you so much. As we go through the book of Mark, though, I wanted to address what I thought is a natural question if you're a student of the Bible, which is, why are there 4 Gospels? Right? I mean, it's the story of Jesus. There aren't 4 books of Romans, right? There aren't 4 Genesis. Would it be genocide? I don't know. All right. I'm not sure on that. What is it, Glenn? Genesis. Okay, there you go. All right, exactly. It's one of those. So why are there 4 Gospels? I think that's a good question because they're telling the same story about Jesus, his ministry, his death, and his resurrection. So why not 1 book? So I wanted to give just a couple of reasons why we have 4 Gospels, but why also we don't just have 1. Right? For one, together they give us a more complete picture of Jesus. A more complete picture of Jesus. Since the 1880s, there was a lot of talk about people's IQ, right? Like IQ tells how smart you are. It's a measurement of how intelligent you are. And they would use it to predict like success or failure. Well, in the 1980s, all of a sudden there was a lot of talk and study about something else. Anybody know what it was? EQ. EQ, which was your emotional quotient, right? And that's basically how well you can, identify with people and interact with them and deal with your own emotions in those kind of situations. And so all of a sudden people are thinking, well, your EQ can really determine your success and your motives and how well you're going to do in life, right? So my thought was, it would make sense that if you looked at someone's IQ and EQ, that would give a more complete picture of what's going on in their brain and how they deal with life, right? Doesn't that make sense? That gives you a better picture. Well, in the same way, while the entire Bible is inspired by God, he used these human authors that have these different backgrounds and personalities to accomplish his purposes. So we have each gospel has its own emphasis and its own purpose. And so it's important to realize they are doing some different things in all of those. Like Matthew is more to a Jewish audience. So it talks more about Jesus' fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies and about Jesus' lineage and why, Jews need to look at what Jesus is and what he's done and why he is, the Messiah of the Bible. So the Jews needed to know Jesus is the Messiah, and let's look at all of the prophecies and let's look at his lineage that point to that fact. Luke shows Jesus as the remedy to the world's ills. I guess Luke was a doctor, so that makes sense, right? In other words, he's emphasizing Jesus' perfect humanity and his concern for the weak and for the suffering and the outcasts in society. John emphasizes Jesus' godhood, and he looks at conversations and sayings of Jesus that point to him being God incarnate, right? So including the signs that he did and the wonders that he did to prove he's the Son of God. And so then we have Mark. Mark is more of a fast-paced book, looking at Jesus' miracles and his interactions with people and more, but not recording his super long teachings. All right? So we'll go back to that in a minute. So even, you have 4 different themes and kind of 4 different purposes behind them. The subject still, though, is the same. Jesus is the one who died to save sinners. That's the core subject. So even though all 4 don't tell the same stories, all 4 do record his resurrection because that's kind of the crux of it. So whether one gospel or the other presents Jesus as a king or as a servant or the Son of Man or the Son of God, they all have the common goal of people coming to a saving faith, right? Of people accepting Jesus as their Lord and Savior. That's the whole point. Second reason, together, the Gospels more impartially and more fairly verify the truthfulness of the stories they tell, of the accounts, right? Way early on, the Bible teaches that, in a court of law, when you make a judgment, do not find someone guilty based on the testimony of a single eyewitness. We need 2 to 3 minimum people that would testify to someone's guilt. So like in Deuteronomy 19:15, one person will not prove the guilt of a sin another man may have done. It will take 2 or 3 people who know about the sin to prove the man's guilt. So in the same way, right, these different accounts of the person and ministry of Jesus help us to have faith in the accuracy when we get this information about him, right? Because we're hearing from these different sources that followed him, that saw what he did, that experienced life with him. Now, that makes sense, right? Because if you had people testifying in a court of law, you would want all of their accounts to agree, right? That this is what happened, this is what we saw. But you would expect there to be some differences in perspective or point of view and some of the details. Some people are going to include details that someone else might not, and other people will leave out details that someone else includes. That just makes sense, and it still makes it valid in a court of law because the accounts still all agree. Think about this. If each gospel had exactly the same information, with exactly the same details, from the same perspective, what would you think? Yes, collusion, which is a fancy word for they got together and planned it. All right? Exactly. That's the whole point. Because that's what we would all think based on that. Right? This is what sets Christianity apart, because we have 4 stories of our Savior rather than one person's word. Like some significant religions in the world have like the core of their faith on one person's word, like meeting an angel in a cave, or reading words on a stone that's in a hat. Okay? Now, I'm not kidding. I'm not going to name them because it's a quiz. See if you can figure that out. If you can figure that out, come tell me. But, there is a major religion that it was based on someone meeting in a cave with an angel, and another one of the founder reading words of God from God out of a stone in a hat. Okay? Lastly, together, the Gospels reward study of the Bible. You get rewarded for studying them together and knowing the Bible. You can learn a lot from an individual study, and we will do that. I'm looking forward to that. Absolutely. But you can get even more when you compare and contrast the different accounts of specific events in Jesus' ministry. Like, so for instance, Luke and Matthew both tell about the healing of the centurion's servant. All right? But Matthew is like 100 words. He's like the tweeter. All right? Whereas Luke does a post. He has like almost 200 words in his. So obviously with that many more words, you're going to get a lot more information about the same story. All right? So since our series is called Mark My Words, let's talk about the book of Mark then specifically. All right? It makes sense, right? We're going to spend time reading through it. So Mark is a cousin of another biblical figure, Barnabas, and if that means nothing to you, don't worry about it. But Barnabas is an important New Testament character. And here's what it says in Colossians 4:10. One of the men here in prison with me is this guy. He says hello to you. Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, says hello. You see, it makes sense why so many people are named Mark and not Aristarchus. All right? Some names really jump out at you in the Bible. Others are like, I'm not naming my kid that. That would be one of those. Although you could be Art from that, right? Artie, right? Exactly. All right. Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, says hello. You have heard before that if he comes to you, you are to receive him and make him happy. Don't you love that? I would love to be, every time someone says, hey, Ted's coming over, make sure he's happy. I love that. That would be great. The scholars aren't positive what would make Mark happy, but they think it was going out for unicorn frappuccinos. That's what it was. They knew it wasn't matzah bread because nobody thinks that's tasty, right? All right. Mark is also called John Mark in the New Testament. So he was an eyewitness to the events in Jesus' life, but he was also a friend of the Apostle Peter, so he also had that firsthand information from Peter. And Peter actually thought of him as a spiritual son. We talked a lot about Peter and Timothy as well. Sorry, Paul and Timothy. And now Peter thinks of him as a spiritual son. This is what he says. The church which is in the city of Babylon says hello. It has been chosen by God the same as you have been. My son, Mark, says hello also. I don't know if you get the feeling, but it's like, I was like, Mark did a lot of what I do to Jolie all the time when she's on the phone. Who are you talking to? Oh, say hi to me. Say hi for me. Right? I don't know if you guys do that. And so like Paul's all writing, Peter's writing, and Mark's like, who are you writing to? He's like, I'm writing to, and he's like, oh, I love them. Say hello for me. So Mark's like kind of jump in here on all these books in the New Testament. Mark had joined Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey, and it's interesting if you read like the book of Acts, he didn't go on the second one because they had a strong disagreement. It was like an apostle fight. Little apostle drama going on. And in case that worries you, they did make up and they worked it out because near the end of Paul's life, Paul did call for Mark to come be with him. That was in 1 Timothy. All right. Mark was writing for the Gentiles, not the Jews. And that explains why he doesn't include important things to Jewish readers. Right? So he doesn't include the genealogies. Christ's conflicts with Jewish leaders, he didn't include those. He didn't include a lot of references to the Old Testament. All right? I kind of look at the Gentiles versus the Jews as like when you take your kids in the back seat on a driving vacation and you're trying to point out to them the historical sites, and they're like, yeah, whatever. They're not impressed by them. So the Gentiles wouldn't really understand the genealogies and the Jewish history as much. So Mark is kind of trying to focus on the things that they would really grasp onto and understand and like. Now, Mark's gospel is unique because it focuses on the actions and interactions of Jesus more than like his long teaching. So that makes it more quick moving. So it starts right away with his baptism. There's no Christmas story. All right? So we're not going to base our Christmas series on the book of Mark. And it goes right into his public ministry in Galilee and when he calls his 12 disciples. That's where it starts. So the point is to reveal that Jesus is the Messiah, not only for Jews, but for the Gentiles as well. Now, how many people checked on our Facebook page even once this week? Anybody in here? Yay! Some of you. Maybe that was a little bit too big of a yay for how many people raised their hand. But on there, you were encouraged to read Mark 1 this week, right? But you can now, if you didn't check it out, you can read it next week. But I do want to say that I'm going to be putting on there things that are important, things that kind of tie in videos and articles that would help with whatever we're reading in Mark. Like this week, I put in a video. Do we have that slide, Russell? Yeah, I put in a video that was kind of like 7-minute overview of Mark. It was really good. It wasn't like funny or anything like that. It was just like the scholarly going, but it was super solid, and it was like really accessible. And I felt more scholarly after listening to it. So I would encourage you to do that. And I will be doing that throughout. If there's an article that kind of ties in or that's important, that brings up something that I'm not going to talk about on Sunday, but that I think is really helpful and useful. So check it out on occasion, or at least turn on the notifications so you know I did something. Tonight we're looking at Mark 1, 23 through 34. So I'm starting on verse 23. And there are 3 short events that reveal something about Jesus' power in our lives. All right, so 3 events that we're going to look at that show us Jesus' power and how he wants to act in my life. I think that's pretty important, right? When we talk about who Jesus is and who he's supposed to be in my life, we want to understand, well, what is he hoping and wanting to do in my heart? Mark 23 through 34. There was a man in the Jewish place of worship who had a demon inside of him. It wasn't like he was like, walking around, here's my demon. The demon cried out, "What do you want of us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You are the Holy One of God." Jesus spoke sharp words to the demon and said, "Do not talk, come out of the man." The demon threw the man down and gave a loud cry. Then he came out of him. The people were all surprised and wondered. They asked each other, "What is this? Is this a new teaching? He speaks with power even to the demons, and they obey him." At once the news about Jesus went through all the country around Galilee. So what we need to see here and realize, Jesus has power in the spiritual realm. Jesus has power in the spiritual realm. Verses like Ephesians 6:12 make it clear there is a spiritual realm beyond what my senses can perceive. I mean, I can smell, taste, touch, see. Did I miss any? Hear. All right. I think we can also sense kind of like movement, right? Whatever that is. Stuff in our ears, in our brain, doing that. There's something beyond that, though. And here's what Ephesians 6:12 says. Our fight is not with people. It is against the leaders and the powers and the spirits of darkness in this world. It is against the demon world that works in the heavens. That's scary, all right? But it helps us deal with people around us, right? Especially when we have conflict. Our fight is not with them, right? The Bible mentions demons repeatedly. that they're fallen angels that followed Satan when he rebelled against God. What we have to do as Christians is separate the cultural portrayal from what the Bible teaches. All right? Because you have tons of movies that involve demons. Like there's this movie Constantine, which I'm not plugging that movie, but it was fascinating. You know, it was and creepy and freaky deaky, and it starred Keanu Reeves. All right, and he sells stuff at Costco. All right. And so you have these portrayals, right? Like it's kind of like my prom date, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. She was not even demon possessed, I don't think. But the Bible never physically describes any fallen angel. All right? Like that. Angels, like angels, demons are these spiritual creatures with a primarily spiritual influence. So they're unlikely to have a set physical appearance like those kind, and that are shown in Hollywood movies. It describes them as powerful, but limited, and ultimately they're already defeated. I mean, you look at that exchange with Jesus, and they're like, we know who you are. Are you here to kick our butts or not? I mean, that's basically, they already know they're defeated. So that's ultimately what we need to realize when we read about them. Other names are used like unclean spirits or evil spirits. But what we have to grapple with is there's this pressure, right? Because a secular world cannot acknowledge or recognize demons because that would admit that there's a spiritual realm, right? That would admit there's something beyond our physical world. So there's pushback against a biblical definition or identification of demons, okay? So this is our tension here. The Bible teaches repeatedly that there is a spiritual world and that there are demons, but we live in a secular society that refuses to acknowledge the biblical definition. Now I said, did you notice what word I emphasized there? Biblical. I say that because there are over 60 some odd shows that have to do with ghosts or paranormal activity. All right, so you figure that one out, right? People like spiritual as long as they don't have to do anything or respond with their lives. All right? As long as it's a ghost story or a TV show, whatever. But once it has to do with right and wrong and a spiritual decision, all bets are off. But clearly, demon possession was something Jesus encountered regularly. You cannot read a gospel without encountering demons during his ministry. But the Bible, and this is where we have to be careful, the Bible never says all afflictions are due to demonic influences. All right? There's plenty of times where he says he casts out demons and he healed their afflictions and diseases. All right? He healed a lot of sicknesses of people that were just sick or ill, not demon-possessed. But it does make sense that here's the Son of God walking on earth, that Satan was actively trying to disrupt what Jesus was doing, what God was trying to do, and that demonic activity was prominent in Jesus' ministry on earth. What's so interesting to me is that demons recognized him and his authority to deal with them more than any person did, right? More than any person did. Why? Because they knew that Jesus reigned over the spiritual realm. They knew he was king. Right? They knew it already. So for us, we have to, as believers, say, I recognize that as well. It's only Jesus that has power to forgive sin. Sin is a spiritual issue. I mean, I can forgive someone for wronging me. Let's say, I want to use Gabe because he always is my scapegoat. Let's say, no, see, because you never would, Gabe. So I can definitely use you for that. So let's say Gabe, he sinned against me. He talked trash about he hates my wardrobe or something like that. I can say that too because we have a lot of the same clothes. All right? So I'm super on safe ground here, right? I can forgive Gabe for sinning against me, but I can't forgive Gabe's sin, right? I don't have the power to do that. Because when I say I forgive him, what does that mean? It means I'm letting go of that, and I'm not going to hold it against you. It's just it's a personal thing. But he still has the issue with God for his sin. Only Jesus can deal with that. Matthew 9, 2 through 6. They took a man to him who was on his bed. This man was not able to move his body. Jesus saw their faith. He said, "Son, take hope. Your sins are forgiven." This is interesting, right? Because here's this person that is paralyzed, and he tells him, "Your sins are forgiven." Some of the teachers of the law said to themselves, "This man speaks as if he is God, but he is not." Jesus knew what they were thinking. He said, "Why do you think bad thoughts in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven?" Because only God can do that. Or to say, "Get up and walk." But this is to show you that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. He said to the sick man, "Get up, take your bed, and go home." Right? Jesus rules the spiritual realm. Next part here, Peter's mother-in-law is healed. Jesus and his followers came out of the Jewish place of worship. Then they went to the house of Simon and Andrew. James and John went with them. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. "Yeah, Mom's sick. Stinks." He went and took her by the hand and raised her up. At once, her sickness was gone. She got up and cared for them. What are we to take from this? He has power in the ordinary. He has power in the ordinary. What do I mean by that? I mean, yes, we already covered he cares about the spiritual needs and our spiritual condition. Absolutely. But he cares about our day-to-day life. Now, in this story, right, he shows up at a house, and the mother-in-law has a fever, so she's down for the count. She's not dying or dead. There's some stories where the person is dying or dead, and Jesus deals with that. She's not on those. She's not in crisis. When we have the flu or a really bad cold, besides feeling cruddy, what's the biggest problem for us? Can't do anything, right? It basically messes up your day-to-day, what you need to do, because you're down for the count, okay? We're inconvenienced, right? He could have just let NyQuil do its work for this mom. He could have, said, take 2 aspirin and get up in the morning, whatever he wanted to say. But in order to allow her to do what she needed to do to run her household, he gave her healing. Right? We shouldn't think that God doesn't care about our day-to-day. All right? We shouldn't not pray about what's going on in our lives. He cares about the day-to-day. Probably even if your dog is sick, he probably can. Probably more cat. If your cat's sick, he cares more than your dog. Not as much for... I know, I just wanted to get you dog people in a little bit. But he cares about what's going on in the day-to-day. And sometimes we neglect that. Like, why should I pray about that, or what does it matter? But Jesus cares about the ordinary. Next and last one. In the evening, Jesus heals in Galilee. In the evening, as the sun went down, the people took all who were sick to Jesus. They took those who had demons to him. All the town gathered at the door. Jesus healed those who were sick of many kinds of diseases. He put out many demons. Jesus would not allow the demons to speak because they knew who he was. What are we looking at here? He has power in the extraordinary. He has power in the extreme situations. What we see in this verse are serious matters, right? People are like, I'm going to bring this person. I'm going to, even if I have to wheel them, right? There's instances in the Bible where they rip apart someone's roof, which would not go over well, all right? And put people down in front of him. These are big deals to the point that people have to bring friends and family to Christ, right? Life has huge bumps and disasters. God cares, and Jesus has power in the extraordinary as well as the ordinary. Right? There's going to be disease. There's going to be physical problems. There's going to be things that seem to fall apart in your life. And it's not always God's will that he's going to make it all better. But it is God's will to be in the midst of it. To be in the midst. Some sickness can be a consequence for sin. Sometimes sickness is a way to give glory to his name in ways that we can't understand in the moment. I mean, in John 9:3, we have this example where Jesus said that this man nor his parents sinned. In other words, his issue is not from sin, right? But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Right? I know many people in my life right now that are going through horrendous things. But as they walk through it, God is getting glory and God is being magnified. And I always pray, like, if I have to walk through something like that, I pray that the same thing can happen. You pray that that's what God uses it for, right? Sometimes God's will is to use the sickness or other issue as a doorway to help us pry our fingers away from the world a little bit more and to come into his presence. He can heal, he can solve things and make things all better, but it's not always his will or his plan to do it that way. This passage teaches us that we are to bring all things to him. Our spiritual matters, our small matters, and our big deals. And let him be Lord of all of it. Let's close in prayer. God, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for your love for us. God, I just pray for as we get into the book of Mark,